I've hijacked an empty classroom because I thought that since we're nearing the Christmas season, my gift to you is handing in an assignment on time for the first time ever. If you hear any extra noises in the back, that's Grisha Cora's group filming literally right between this wall. So, Hitler. You know him, you hate him, and you teach kids about him pretty much every year. But let me run it back for you one more time because I need a good grade. Adolf Hitler was born in Austria on April 20, 1889, to a very interesting family. He was essentially an incest baby. I mean, first cousins, and his dad was not the best. To put it quite frankly, his dad was abusive to him and his brothers and hit them all the time, which led to a very complicated relationship between Hitler and his dad, specifically his dad's nationality.
Wait, it just makes it look nice and clean.
Yeah. You want to say hi?
Sure. I'm McPherson.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
And I'll look at-
Oh, it looks like a YouTube video. Thank you so much. Anywho, he is Austrian, but his dad was a big public official, like the government in Austria, and the part of Austria that they lived in used to be part of the German Confederation. So, out of spite, Hitler got really into German nationalism. And after his beloved brother died at the age of 6 when he was 10, he became sort of like a completely different person. His grades started slipping, and it didn't help that other kids in his high school treated him like crap. But one thing that he did get really good at was writing and drawing. After his father passed, he barely passed his final semester at school, and then he got blackout drugged and wiped with his certificate, like anyone would, obviously. But then he didn't take the final exam, so he just dropped out of school and spent most of his time with his friend who wrote a bunch of books about him named August Kubizek. So then when he was 19, he traveled all the way to Vienna to do an arts entrance exam for an art school, and he failed. So then he returned back home to his mother, who fell gravely ill, and when she passed away, he moved back to Vienna, still hoping to do arts, and basically became homeless for the next couple years. And no one knows where his anti-Semitic worldviews came about, but it's probably from his time in the streets. There's no confirmed background on it, but it's probably from something that happened when he was homeless. Maybe a bad host at a homeless shelter or a prostitute, something like that. So then when he was 24, still in the streets, he moved to Munich so he didn't have to do mandatory military service. But then World War I came around and he signed up for the war anyways. But I mean, he had a good time there. The soldiers that he worked with gave him a sense of brotherhood more than the kids in his high school ever did. He was even awarded an Iron Cross for being a brave and good soldier. So then after Germany loses World War I, they are signed with the Treaty of Versailles, which treated them like crap and absolutely tanked their economy. And seeing how his beloved country became in shambles after the war, he began hating the people who were responsible, which in his mind were the communists and the Jews. So then after the war, he was basically turned into a spy to go look for commies. And then while he was infiltrating one of these meetings, he found out that they weren't communists at all. They were actually fascists, which he very much agreed with. So then he quit the military and joined this party for good, and they loved him, and he became a leader and changed their name from the German Workers' Party to National Socialistisch Deutsche, or to the Nazi Party for short. And the communists tried to start a revolution in Germany, and also just like the German government was very wary of communists at this time. And so with this party, he started making a lot of these promises of making, I almost said America great again, which says a lot right now, but he made promises of making Germany great again and restoring it to its former glory, da 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 da. But then he also said that only Aryans should be allowed to be citizens of this new German country, and that all Jewish people would get kicked out, which wasn't actually a very uncommon right-wing agenda at the time. But what really made the Nazi Party stand out was just Hitler himself. So after World War I, after the Treaty of Versailles, in order for Germany to pay their reparations that was set in the treaty, they just started printing more money, which, surprise, surprise, rose their inflation by bombastic amounts, literally made money practically worthless. And the government was just useless at this point. So then this genius Hitler was like, our country's going to crap right now. Let's start a revolution. Mussolini copycat. So then he stormed a beer hall and was like, let's start a revolution. And then they all stormed the streets trying to get the police to go with them, but they got arrested instead. And during his trial, instead of just pleading guilty or not guilty, he used that time in court to basically get publicity, because his name was already going around, and the amount of reporters that were there to see him go to trial just boosted his popularity even more. He was basically spreading all his ideologies, the Nazi ideologies, to the public, and the reporters were reporting on it, and he ended up going to jail. He was supposed to go to jail for like a good amount of years, but then he only went for 9 months. But it wasn't even really prison, it was just like some glorified hotel room. But in his time there, he wrote a supposedly terrible book called Mein Kampf, which is just more yapping about how much he hates Jewish people, his ideologies. And during his time in prison, while his name was getting around, the Nazi Party became more and more popular. And after he got out and published his book, it became even more popular. And sooner or later, he ran for presidency. He first ran for presidency in 1932, where he didn't really get many votes, but then as the years went on and he just kept running and he kept getting more popular, it eventually added up to him getting about 30-something% of the votes, which is still a lot. That's like 1/3 of the people of the country. Okay, new day because I ran out of time last time. But since he was the leader of the second biggest party, he became chancellor. But on January of 1933, the Parliament building set on fire, and Hitler thought this would be a great time to manipulate the president to give him more power. So then he went to the president and was like, hey, Mr. President, if you give me more power, I'll totally look for the person who set the building on fire. But surprise, surprise, he used his power, and he just started arresting and putting all of his enemies into jail. There was even one night where he rounded up his men and they just took out anyone who was like publicly, actively against Hitler, who could have been a liability to his running presidency. It was called the Night of the Long Knives, and it took out politicians, reporters, anyone who had anything bad to say about Hitler and had power to do something about it. And since obviously all of his enemies are in jail, by the time the next election comes around, no one's there to oppose him. So he wins and becomes president of Germany. Because of this, his presidency became an absolute dictation, and people lost their freedom of speech, their freedom of expression, and the Jewish people were outcasted and boycotted and eventually put in into concentration camps where they were killed and tortured. He even started this movement called the Hitler Youth and eradicated every other kind of like Boy Scouts or clubs outside of school at that time, so he could further brainwash the future of Germany into developing his Nazi beliefs. Eventually, he made it pretty much illegal to speak out against him and not support him, and anyone who was found doing so would also get thrown into these concentration camps.